Strangers passing in the street, by chance two separate glances meet, and I am you, and what I see is me. Salutations from space, aloha from Earth, friends. Welcome to Starry Telling Hour, 11:11 a.m. Pacific Time on Wednesdays, miércoles, Mercury days. Did I say 11:11 a.m.? Sometimes I get that wrong. A.m., p.m. Is that a polarity? Well, certainly day and night are. We want to talk about the power of polarity today, friends. I will say it is inspired by an experience I had outside that you can see on your screen. I went out yesterday morning. I tried to go again today, but it wasn't happening because of the fog. Well, you know what? I did go outside. I just didn't see the stars I had hoped to see with my eyes in space. But so we'll spend some more time with this image from yesterday because I want to, well, I don't want to like trap this in current context alone. I want these storytelling hours to have legs. I want them to also speak to folks who tune in from a time that I currently perceive to be the future. I do also want to speak about the time now because we're going to find, I believe, the power of polarity significantly ramping up. And I'll share with you why. And that will be a vehicle that we can ride into this topic of polarity and an investigation of the power of polarity and what is it good for? Absolutely something, or else we wouldn't incarnate, is my feel. We'll probably find our way to the number magic of 1, 2, and 3, or I should say oneness and two-ness and the Holy Ghost. Wait, what? What do I mean? Yeah, let's play in that space together some, and maybe we'll look at oneness, two-ness, and three-ness through the lenses of quadrivium, of sacred astronomy and sacred harmony and sacred geometry and number magic. Let me get this thing back on the screen and I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience the other day. And then we'll look in the weeks to come, specifically August 14th, 2024, when Mars conjoins Jupiter. That might be a time when like some of the madness opportunities that are currently alive for us, like, are most pronounced. But of course, you know, all you need to do in any moment forever is turn on a TV screen. And if you'd like to study polarity, of course, especially in an election year. And, you know, it's really fun in the social media spaces right now. I really try not to spend too much time there. I'm crazy busy given that we've now have a 6-week-old baby, and with work and all these things, you know. But sorry, I'm just distracted because I see 2 of you here are from Wales. I hope you'll hang out. I hope this is a place where you just met one another and you'll follow up and get together at some amazing stone circle or the like and talk about the starry science. And I guess I should just say a place you can do that online is at Constellations, which is the School of Astrology's membership community. So GeminiBrett.com/constellations if you want to learn more about that. I'll drop another plug in a little bit. Okay, so where was I? Well, let's just get to this picture and we'll see if it can indeed tell 1,000 words and if I might somehow be able to say a couple less. So let me get a Brett inside a Brett inside a Brett, and then we'll do this. Okay. So storytelling hour today, Wednesday, July 31st, 2024, 11:11 a.m. Pacific time. That 11:11 thing is kind of funny because next week we'll be talking about 8/8 and whether it's a thing or not. And clearly I like number play, so why don't I sign up? Maybe I should. Maybe I have. Maybe I haven't. Next week on Storytelling Hour, and I'll say more about that before we're done, I think. I somehow didn't realize when I went out and oh, no, this chart, by the way, is not what we're looking at in this photograph. I was like, I didn't notice this was a lunar return, and I just looked at where the moon was, and it's like, it wasn't. It's like, oh, this is right. I'm having a lunar return right now. When I was born, the moon was at 2501 tropical Gemini. So that's a fun coincidence here for Storytelling Hour today. Let me go back a day. I'll turn this thing around and we'll rewind the clock to like 4:11 a.m. And that's around the time of this photograph. All right. So what you're seeing here is a crescent moon, right? It's almost the perfect sextile. So this is the shape of the moon's smile when sextile. It's a little bit blown out because the camera is taking in a lot of light. Basically, the way that we draw the moon glyph is what we see when moon is sextile or hexagon to the sun. So this is Mars here near the moon, which you can see in the chart, right? Moon conjoined Mars. Shield conjoined Jupiter afterwards, which I was hoping to see this morning. And here's Jupiter, who's currently kind of making the third eye of the bull, right? This star that I'm circling here on the right, this is Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. In our day and age, 10 degrees tropical Gemini. This is Ein, the other eye of the bull, whose face is this V, or this, I guess, greater than sign as it's currently oriented in the photograph. That's called the Hyades. They were daughters of Atlas and therefore stepsisters of these stars here, who are the Pleiades. This one at the bottom of the upper triangle is Maya, the being for whom my daughter is named. Daughters of Atlas and Pleione, these Pleiades, who are the two stars at the bottom. Anyway, in our day and age, the Pleiades marks the cusp between tropical Taurus and Gemini. In fact, Electra here is still in tropical Taurus. So is, no, I think not Electra, Kalani and Asterope, I believe, are the two of the Pleiades that still live in tropical Taurus, while the rest have processed across the cusp into tropical Gemini. Maya did this in 2023, right? So when you looked at the Pleiades, or you see planets near the Pleiades, know that this means, let me see if I can make this larger on your screen again. Know that this means that they are moving from tropical Taurus to tropical Gemini. I don't know if you can feel my frustration. My computer's doing, or I'm doing some annoying things with my computer right now. I almost shirked responsibility, didn't I? All right, let's see how this works out. All right, oh yeah, you'll see this little cursor if I play. Okay, so Moon is entered Gemini. Like that would have happened earlier when Moon passed the Pleiades. And it's really powerful that in our day and age, we have some beautiful stars, and in this case, clusters that mark sign cusps. Regulus is at a sign cusp in our day and age as well. All right, so here we see Moon and Mars somewhere between the Pleiades and between Aldebaran, the royal star that's down at the bottom of the screen, just to the left of that tree branch here. And again, the eye of the bull, Aldebaran, in our day and age is processed to 10 degrees tropical Gemini. And so we can see the Moon and Mars here about halfway in between the Pleiades and Aldebaran, and therefore about 5 degrees Gemini. They were actually at 6 and 7, I'm seeing in the chart, which I'll put back on the screen in a bit. Jupiter further along, right? Jupiter now about halfway through the sign of Gemini. And that's when planets make the third eye of the bull. In our day and age, this will change with precession. So it's a cool thing to see. I've got images of Venus here too. That's actually my magical Aldebaran ring was made at a time when Venus was there. But if these are the two eyes of the bull, Ein and Aldebaran, then this is like the Bindi, right? Like the third eye where Jupiter is for a bit, and where Mars will soon meet Jupiter there. All right. Well, as I was photographing this image, and I decided to leave some of the other stars in view for you, like the stars of Orion who are now rising. Actually, that was the thing that most surprised me this morning is I looked through this little window over here, which is the only window of our house that has a view of the eastern side of the heavens. And I had been seeing the Pleiades through that window last month. And again, I'm very excited about the Pleiades, always have been, but maybe even more so now that Maya was born. And I saw this star that I'm circling, which is Betelgeuse, which is the shoulder of Orion. And I was like, wait, who is that? Like what? Who? Like that's a bright star, and that's not Capella. It's not Aldebaran. They've risen already. It's like, oh my gosh, Orion has risen, and I didn't even know. So this was the first time when clouds allow, and I got outside to be able to see Orion, who is now clearly visible on the morning side. This is called the heliacal rise of Orion. And if you're on my mailing list, and I hope you are, you've been assigned a scavenger hunt for this week to get out before the sun and to connect with Orion in the morning star east, and to check in every few days, maybe every week, and see if you can find Sirius smiling back at you. See if you can witness the heliacal rising of Sirius. For some say that this is the astronomy behind the so-called 8-8 Lionsgate portal that, of course, we're about to start hearing so much about because that date is rushing towards us. And again, next week on Storytelling Hour on August 7th, I'll be investigating the astronomy of the 8-8 Lionsgate. Is it a thing? What does the astronomy say? Anyway, it's really cool to see Orion rising. There's an old story. I'm currently editing a bunch of classes that I recorded with my first teacher, with Daniel Jamario, for his school, the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, which is their fourth course on cosmology. Well, their fourth course, a course on cosmology and navigating the night sky. And I'm editing. I just finished editing one of the classes where I shared this story about Orion, which is very, for me, clearly a story about Orion's annual settings and risings. Should I save this for next week? Yes. Be here on Storytelling Hour next week, and I'll share more with you about Orion rising in the east, and how us having this sight of the true shepherd of Nu, as the stars we call Orion was known to the Babylonians at some time, is mythically coded in the tale of how Orion was guided to the east to get his sight back. Okay, let me try to stay on track. So the other thing about this photo that I love is I just really wanted to share, because I will often crop them out, like when I don't have a baby, I get in the car and I drive like 10 minutes this way and I stand on a hill and it's just me and the cows, sometimes coyotes and hopefully not puma. And I don't have no parking signs and cars in the backs of mailboxes and the neighborhood watch sign in the back of a, stop sign blank and whatnot. But what happened is when I was engaging with the sky and just listening, So I saw Beetlejuice and I was like, oh, I gotta go outside and check this out. And then it was like, oh, right, the moon is like with Mars right now. And I love this because so often I'm in these charts every day, I'm doing a lot of readings and whatnot. But it's also nice to like not be in it every moment and to allow that awe and wonder that comes on the wings of surprise, to just really opened my heart and my mind. And so the interesting coincidence here is I was gazing at this and I was contemplating, well, oh wow, moon's with Mars and moon will be with Jupiter. And wow, Mars is like almost with Jupiter. How time flies, how Mars flies, because I was very clearly watching Mars with Uranus over here next to the Pleiades. It feels like yesterday. Um, and then before then seeing Mars up here and on we go, right? Like it's really powerful to watch celestial time and to see how the sky changes during the course of the year and to see how the planets do their own thing according to their own periods and speed, um anyway, so I'm tripping on like, wow, this is like a serious Gemini planet party. And then this car that was speeding, and I'm more sensitive now to speeding cars on our street than I was before because baby, right? Um, and the car just comes screeching to this halt. And it's like, no, man, I'm looking at all this Gemini, like cars are made to move, right? And so looking at parked cars and this no parking sign, and then just, like being in this space of watching the great debate about whether ear was pierced or not, about the Coke side versus the Pepsi side, about whether that thing was a, grand televised Illuminati occult ritual or whether it was just simple art in play. I read this thing this morning that was pretty fun. Let me get this out so I can use someone else's words. Where was that one? You don't have to be a Christian to be disturbed by a drag show with kids, dark symbolism, and someone's balls hanging out at a sporting event. It's an interesting thing, right? So watching this like great polarized debate that's happening simply around like the Olympics ritual is hilarious. Oh, and I guess I just called it a ritual. Anyway, moving on. Just know that your TV screen will be full of very purposeful rituals, especially at these huge events that are so watched. But maybe you've seen that the numbers for the Olympics are way down right now. Um, and some of that is because people are really turned off by why do we need all of this imagery when we're just trying to like see athletes compete. Not the only reason, right? So this polarization, right? Should this athlete be allowed to compete with the women, for example? What is gender and such? And maybe we'll look at the Kybalion today. Um, that sees gender as one of like the 7 rules of all that is. One of them is polarity. And some might say, well, what's the difference between those two? So anyway, I'm listening to this Gemini planet party the other morning. I hear this car screeching to a halt, and I'm contemplating that need for speed versus the stop sign and safety and such, freedom in the law, whatever it may be. And it's like, yeah, this is like polarizing time. And we should all be really careful to take a few breaths before we respond or speak. Mystical Rainbow asking if I'm a daddy yet. I am. I am indeed. I mean, I've been in the world of an amazing young boy since he was 3, so there was that. But yeah, Maya, our baby girl, was born on Father's Day, so she's about 6 weeks and 4 days old today. But who's counting? Planets are. So I thought we could speak about polarity. I want to show you a couple of things in the charts that would say that as I'm recording this, it's kind of a highlight. You might also feel pulled in a million directions because Gemini is not like inherently polarity. Okay, let me make this a 0 Aries wheel. We'll make it a little bit more global, or at least less local in doing so. All right. So the moon has since passed Jupiter by. Here is right now, moon at 25:10 Gemini. That's fun. I literally had a lunar return, happens every 27 and a third days. But live on screen, a lunar return with some nerd. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed that ritual. Okay. Anyway, Moon has recently sextiled Venus, is on her way to square Neptune. Um, so Moon very soon will return home to that space we call tropical Cancer, and that's happening at 8:19 p.m. Pacific today. It will be August 1st for many of you, like those of you who are tuning in from Wales. Thank you. Thanks for all of you for tuning in from wherever you are in space and in time. What a present to receive the presence of you. All right. So, it's not going to be like Gemini triplets for long, but we will have these Gemini twins for a while. I mean, Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. Mars will speed along, usually about 2 months in a sign, really depends. Mars will, however, let me show you this. Well, you know what? Let me not go there right now. I just want to show you Mars conjunct Jupiter. So that will happen on August 14th. That will actually be a Wednesday. So we'll probably return to this thing in a couple of weeks. I would love to know at that time how it's going for you, because in a sense it won't be done. Let me change the shapes that are displayed here on this Astro Gold chart, and we'll go look at the eighth harmonic. And you can see it drawn in, not fully, but there's a T square that's happening at that time of Mars Jupiter conjunct in Gemini, August 14th, 2024, where Venus here in Virgo, right, is applying to the square. The moon is opposite them in the sign of Sagittarius. And along with the Gemini 2 squaring this Pisces Saturn, right? So there's a lot of kind of strong energy. Of course, moon will kind of move through these things quickly, but we're going to have Venus, who is just now or very soon ingressing Virgo. We soon after will see Venus oppose Saturn. So Venus ingress Virgo is August 4th. Mercury will retrograde also that day, this Sunday, and then head back into the Leo space. It's, as you can see, also a Leo new moon, right? But let me show you Venus opposite Saturn. That is August 19th. Let me show you, it's going to be a ways from then, after Mercury stations direct on August 28th. Mercury will return home to Virgo on September 8th. It's right around the time of Sun opposite Saturn, which means Earth passing Saturn by, Saturn in the middle of his retrograde. So maybe we'll speak about that at that time. Mercury opposite Saturn, September 18th. All right. So like this story, it's loud and it's consistent and it's hanging out. But other dates I just want to show you, maybe before I put this thing away, and then we'll wrap about it, is Gemini Mars squaring Pisces Saturn, which is August 15th. So just the day after the Mars Jupiter conjunction. Jupiter in the sign of Gemini squaring Pisces Saturn, August 19th. right? So you get Mars square Saturn, then Venus opposite Saturn, then Jupiter square Saturn, then Sun opposite Saturn, and then Mercury opposite Saturn. And like the moon just kind of activating this as she does all things each month. So what? All right. And what does this have to do with the power of polarity? Well, all of this Gemini energy, and really it only takes two powerful planets like Mars and Jupiter in Gemini for there to be all of this Gemini energy. There's always all of this Gemini energy, at least around here. Especially now that my incredibly Gemini charted baby was born. There's once energy gets ramped up, some of these like tales of polarity do, I would say even more so, and things I imagine you are already experiencing and will continue to. And it's interesting that it's like the main theme that I'm hearing from clients is, oh my God, there's so many things to do and there's no time to do them all. And which one should I choose? And when does that relax? I mean, I literally that like almost every reading in the past 5 days has had that theme, and I know it's going to be the theme moving forward. I should have like feel like there's too many things that you can do and you don't know which to choose, Sale, because it's in the air. Can I just ask people who are listening to this live, because I can see your comments, are you feeling that vibe? Are you feeling like there's just like way too many options and I don't know where to go? Which, by the way, can be also in the Libra realm, right? But it's definitely kind of in the Gemini space. Leo can be too. So Wendy, I'm seeing a yes from you. We'll see if the yeses begin to pour, and I want to look at Instagram as well. We get it absolutely there from Age with Grace. That's a nice reminder. Thank you. QZ on a, oh hell yeah, and then we get some absolutelys from Alice and Kat. So anyway, we have evidence that this is happening in Wales for at least two powerful beings. Jane with a yes as well. Hugely, we hear. And interesting here from Elizabeth, not options, but a lot of internal commentary. That's cool to hear, because that's like another way where loud Gemini can really activate us. Yeah, so I'm appreciating hearing that. Lots of information, right? Yeah, and I'm appreciating that too. Almudena, what a cool name. Hopefully I'm not pronouncing that completely incorrectly. H, yes, and H has a Jupiter return going down. Too much work and not enough time. Am I wasting my life away? Says Return to the Sea. Well, at least we know where you can go to chill and listen to the breath of Mother Nature and those waves that she brings to the shore. And we're hearing an increase in work. Yeah, I'm feeling that one too. Trying to like learn how to juggle work and creativity and being a dad of a baby, which for me is very new. It's a whole thing, right? But I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone in this. Like we're all going to experience in different ways. So anyway, I think I heard literally 3 times, 3 clients yesterday. There's so many things for me to choose from. Like, which way should I go? And when will I know? And like, when does this energy chill? And it's like, I mean, kind of like when you make a decision, right? Let's not forget free will. But the way I feel things are kind of staged right now, it's going to be really easy to move from the, oh my God, there's too many choices pain to shit, I think I chose the wrong one. Or did I? Or what if I, the kind of FOMO takeover. And so I really feel it's going to be like mid-September after these in August, the Mars Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, the Gemini Mars square Pisces Saturn, the Virgo Venus opposite Pisces Saturn, the Gemini Jupiter square Pisces Saturn, right? And then again, like Sun won't oppose Saturn, which means the middle of Saturn's retrograde. until September 7th. And then Virgo Mercury, after the retrograde, won't oppose Saturn until September 18th. And yeah, I don't mean to be like some bearer of bad news. So let's see where we can go from that. But I imagine that kind of energy is going to be tricky. And somebody mentioned information overload, right? That was the big thing, right? It's like the power of polarity in the way that like we will feel more and more divided if we're not careful and aren't coming from the heart in this time of just information overwhelm. Like that's going to become more and more clear. So Marilyn here says, for example, lots of conflict and division and yeah, election year, right? And how much do you want to participate with that? And my new mantra for me is I am only perpetuating the program of polarity division if I'm trying to bring others to the light rather than trying to see the light in them. Ain't it easy? I can't even say it. It's not easy, but I'm trying, and that's my goal. That's like this main mantra for me. Like, don't bring them to the light. They are the light. Learn to see it, right? And if you can do that with, the person or the people that you feel are most on the opposite side of you, if you can realize that they are humans too, um, that they were born and they will die, and whatever it is necessary to help you really see the humanity into people that you're being trained to believe are not humane, the more you get to break out of this division program. I'm trying to catch up with the comments, but they're getting technical. Okay, so let's talk about the power of polarity, because I think that's another thing. It's not like Gemini itself is polarity. I was just mentioning this cosmology course that Daniel Jamari and I have been recording. We've recorded it. Now I'm editing it and animating it and illustrating it. It's like a ton of work that I'm up to right now. But a nice thing about that is I really get to review the material, move things around, maybe cut some stuff out if it got redundant or whatever, right? But Daniel was talking about how when he was at a very special place for him, he's actually there right now. He calls it Fish Lake Valley, which is like just like this petroglyph site that just called him in when he was driving in the middle of nowhere one day, and it's become a really important space to the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. Anyway, yeah, he was sharing how he was there alone one time, just kind of doing the work, and was tripping on what's called the sacred hoop of stars, where some traditions say our souls come from, and looking at the twins constellation and just seeing them as this like Roman numeral 2, and this idea of like, because so many traditions believe our souls come in from this space and that we're heading to the place on the other side, which is the galactic center, that it's like we come into this world of duality, and that's just part of it. So I wanted to speak about that today, and about the power of polarity and why polarity doesn't have to be seen only as some negative thing. And so to do this with some creativity, I'm going to bring you into one of the classes that I created for the golden year of Earth astrology, which, by the way, you can purchase if you head to geminibrett.com/courses. I'm going to drop 2 links here, actually. So geminibrett.com/constellations will get you to the School of Astrology's membership group. We're still offering the maiden voyage price of only $16 a month, or $160 for a year. And there's 4 teachings every month. One from me, one from Amala Hall, who's been on the show about astro-herbalism, plant-planet correspondence. One from Alyssa Luna, who's been on the show as well, about astro-embodiment. She's offering beautiful practices tuned to the energies of the 12, and one from Phelan Shiva, who's leading an Astro Tarot circle in constellations, which is cool, right? Bringing these two powerful arts together. And then I teach a monthly class that's on the first Saturday of each calendar month. And that's coming this Saturday. So it's this Saturday at 9 a.m. I'm going to be speaking about more powerful ways to play with Mercury retrograde. So we don't fall prey to this, just do nothing, shut it all down, right? And talk to no one, hide under a rock until it's over, training that I see offered by too many. So if you would like to join me, if you're in constellations, friends, I will, you know where to go, but I'll also send out a reminder shortly after this jam with the Zoom link. So we'll see you on Saturday. If you'd like to join, you can just join for a month, cancel anytime, $16, and come join this class. We'll do some ritual. Probably look a little bit different than the one that happened in Paris. We will speak about just timings of Mercury, not just this shadow thing. And so you get even more time to shut it all down and hide under a rock, but like looking at the actual shapes that Mercury makes in our sky and working with the as above, so below, as below, so above code that Gary Caton has cracked in the Mercury cycles, talking a little bit about Mercury elemental years, Mercury cycles, and working quite intentionally through offerings and wish lists when Mercury comes by, just as we were taught to when Santa does. So join me this Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, for more powerful ways to play with Mercury retrograde in the School of Earth Astrology's constellations space. And you can do that by coming to geminibrett.com/constellations. Okay, let me put one more link in the tab, which is geminibrett.com/courses. Last year, 2 years ago, I took a deep dive on Sundays, monthly, in what I call the golden year of Earth astrology. Look at this wonderful testimonial from QZ. Thank you. I highly recommend Constellations. What an amazing group of people with the most knowledgeable teachers. Thank you. And thank you also for that reminder, because it's not just about these 4 classes that happen, like there's a class every week. But we have organized community discussion times where you can link up with fellow star seekers, right? You're not alone. Yes, you're weird, right? Good for you. You did it. We're going through a weirding, and let's do it together. Let's find fellowship. Like, that's the idea of that space. All right. Nadine, thank you so much also for saying this. Okay, so geminibrett.com/courses will get you to a few offerings on my page, including a fixed star jam, a fractal time jam, and then the golden year. Like, if you're good at watching things that have already been recorded, there is so much there for you for a very small price for what you'll get. And we're about to tune into some of that together in a class that was called Polarity. So let me get this on the screen. I'm remembering I have to push some other buttons. Play slideshow in window. All right, and then we can do this so I can still see some comments along the way, and we'll do one of these and one of these. Okay, I love that the power button, right? Looks like a circle and a line. So, by the way, we're starting in the middle because, of course, that's the best ending at the beginning. And I had led up to this image in many ways. I really find that the sacred geometry is one of the most, illustrative teachers in the mystery traditions. So as I'm exploring oneness and two-ness and three-ness, like, I learned so much at the launch pad, which is what I like to call my pad, where I draw these geometries with the compass and the rule, and the compass makes curves which are immeasurable, And the rule makes lines which are, so quality and quantity, and on we go. Anyway, yeah, what I realized when I was creating this as well, because I had just kind of offered a sacred geometry or sacred astronomy practice, really, of creating an earth wheel where you reside or where you go to connect with the stars so you can connect with the cardinal directions. Is the power glyph, it looks a lot like this center staff or gnomon at the center of a circle in an earth wheel. And then it really had me tripping on perspective, right? So in the class before, I'd been speaking a lot about oneness and about the circumpunct. And this amazing kind of essence of that point at the center of the circle of spirit. So really being pulled towards, when I can find the time. This is one of the ways that I'm experiencing some of the Gemini madness right now. Starting a podcast called What's the Point? Right? Because it really is all about that point in the center of the circle from which every point of the circle or the sphere emerges. And I don't have time to teach the entirety of the circle of spirit. None of us do. But I just want to at least mention that. And I love that in this day and age, we use this symbol, the circumpunct, to depict the sun. You can see perhaps Earth orbiting the sun in that image, which, by the way, wouldn't be circular, but rather elliptical, but that's okay. You might see, from Earth's point of view, the sun circling Earth. There's many ways that we can play with time and space, you know? What if I looked at this thing on its side? Oops, just becomes a line. And I think that's an interesting, I mean, that opens up worlds of wonder for me. So the line is actually a circle. This is from a really wonderful text called Serpent in the Sky by John Anthony West, where he's exploring number magic through the lens of a great mystical researcher named Swallow-Day Lubitz, who spent like decades at the Karnak and Luxor temples in Kemet, in the land we now call Egypt. Serpent in the Sky, I really highly recommend its discourse on the magic of the quality of the numbers. So he writes this: the absolute unity in becoming conscious of itself creates multiplicity or polarity. One becomes two. So this is one of the opportunities of polarity. All right. Alan Watts, brilliant teacher in so many ways. Maybe my favorite teacher in the regards to there is no space without up and down or in and out, right? If you've studied your Platonic solids, you'll know that the hexahedron, which you may know as the cube, was associated by many of the mystery traditions with the earth element, right? Not because they thought the earth was flat or a cube, by the way, but because it really is like the most grounded of these five sacred shapes called the Platonic solids, and the most unmovable of them, as the earth is the most formed element, the most dense, the most gross, to use the alchemical term. And you get the seven directions here, right? So if you're here, the seventh direction is the first, which is the heart of it all, right? You have now up and down, right? And east and west, and north and south, right? And there can't be you without an up and a down. Now, can there be you without a red and a blue? Like, that's an interesting question. But I do feel that there is an opportunity in the polarity programming, if we can witness it without getting caught up in it, to really contemplate two-ness. Is there a purpose of polarity? Neo asked this cool question. Are these basic shapes conscious? Cool. Right? Like, is there something about a cube? I would say yes. Neo, what do you think? I feel yes. I mean, in a sense, it's like these platonic solids, the hexahedron, which is the cube, right? The most simple of these. I usually have things around, but I don't right now. The tetrahedron, 4 triangles, right? 3-sided pyramid. The octahedron, which are like, a 4-sided pyramid up and one down, right? So like a fluoride crystal. The icosahedron, the 20 triangles, or the dodecagon, the 12 pentagons. It's like the most efficient spaces. So, I mean, when you ask, are these basic shapes conscious? I would say yes, because I feel that consciousness is. Elizabeth I agree with this in a huge way. They certainly hold a specific frequency, right? You can kind of feel that, right? And so, like, as space kind of organizes itself into dodecagon, for example, we can really feel the energetic of that. And what is consciousness but energy, All right. So one becomes two. Unity in becoming conscious of itself creates multiplicity or polarity. So this is a very beautiful way to go participate with two-ness that doesn't feel like it's going to rip us apart. So in number, there is quantity and there is quality. We only learn quantity in school. And the exercise I always love to encourage people to participate with is simply invoked by asking this question: what if we taught the kids to contemplate oneness before we told them that 1 + 1 is 2? Right? So there is one, like one chicken. Right? I mean, there is currently one armillary sphere on my desk. Which is a very low amount of armillary spheres compared to normal. My desk is usually full of armillary spheres. There's currently, I gotta look around and make sure this is true. There's only one globe here right now too, which is also kind of a low number of globes on a Gemini bread desk. What about yours? So, one, right? One crystal, 2 crystals. Oh, wait. White and black are selenite and tourmaline polarities. Does polarity simply mean opposite? That's hard to say. That's like the story of the line, which has 2 sides. And we'll look at this in this presentation that I hope to get back to in regards to astrology and the so-called opposition. But even that, it really is a study of oneness. Like hot and cold are actually the 2 sides of one thing called temperature. Up and down are the 2 sides of one thing. In and out are the 2 sides of one thing. One thing I was really fascinated to see, and I had no idea that this was true, but when I started today at 11:11 a.m. Pacific time, as I do for storytelling hour every miércoles, every Mercury's day, every Wednesday. Let me put our feet back on the ground here locally. We had the Libra South Node rising and the Aries North Node setting. I mean, like almost exactly. And it was like, I see. right? I guess this whisper I heard from the heavens yesterday was just aligning me to the time of this jam that we're having together. Mani saying a great analogy for gender too, right? What do we want to call those things? And we're going to get, into it a bit here in this polarity presentation. Like polarity presentations are really fun because they're like inherently polarizing, right? But if we call that like feminine and masculine, are they two sides of one thing? And if so, what is that one thing? Well, you don't make a child without them. But I will suggest this: the child is the four. And let's play with 1 and 2 and oneness and two-ness and then find our way back there. Okay, please remind me at the end if I didn't talk about the Holy Ghost to do so. Hermes says, "'Tis true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. To do the miracles of one only thing. And as all things have been, all things arose from this one thing through mediation." You know what? It's rare for me to not be able to speak the words of Hermes' Emerald Tablet, but they're not happening right now. So I'm going to go look it up. This is mostly Isaac Newton's translation that we'll tune into here. As all things have been, and arose from the one through the mediation of one, so all things have their birth in this one thing by adaptation. Great, we didn't have to go look it up. It's in here. Okay, as all things have been, and arose from the one through the meditation of one, so all things have their birth, this one thing, through adaptation. Many, many different translations of the Emerald Tablets over time. That one, again, kind of rooted in the translation offered by Isaac Newton, who is far too Hermetic to be considered Newtonian in the parlance of our day. What does this mean? And I love that some translations offer this word mediation and some meditation. Meditation may be a little bit more true to the experience that many of us have had when trying to, paralyze the self and slow the breath and find that deep space of, meditation. That through the pain of not being able to turn off the mind, we somehow snap out of ourselves and watch ourselves think. And maybe you haven't been there, maybe you have. But, another maybe easier example is, what about when you're looking at you and you take a good look at yourself? Take a good look at yourself, all right? Who are you looking at? And who's doing the looking? So this is the miracle of two-ness. Somehow, unity, the one only thing that ever was, is, and will be, considered itself. Now, this is the great miracle. Where, like, this is the impossibility. For modern cosmologists, right, the great miracle is the Big Bang, right, which isn't a conscious thing at all. It's just this accident that happened, right? So they only have the one sphere, right? But for many, this is about spirit considering itself, the one only thing that ever was, is, and will be. For me, that thing is entirely indivisible. So I used to lean towards the common teaching that we're all the souls, like little pieces of spirit, which is the word I use for the one thing. And so you just put all the little souls together, some glue. That's a soul too. And then, spirit. But I don't think that's possible. I think, the first rule is that spirit itself is indivisible. And so we don't get here through division. We get here through reflection. We get here through adaptation. And so in my religion, and the moon taught me this one night when she reminded me that I'm actually looking at her reflection of sunlight to earthly eyes. The moon is literally an incarnational device that reflects the one light in a unique way that will never repeat. I don't have to go beyond the moon and the sun in your earthly chart to show you that the moment in which you were born is your moment and yours alone. And it was experienced in that space where you were born in a unique way that was different than the space down the street. The moon delivers sunlight to earth, spirit reflected through soul into matter, into this place with the appearance of time and space. Why? So we can make moves, so we can grow. Because as you grow, the one only thing grows, which is the miracle, because it's everything, and therefore it's kind of inherently nothing. It can't do anything, and yet it will never stop growing because of miracles like you, spirit reflected through soul into matter. And for me, that's the incarnational purpose of the moon, to reflect the one light in a unique way. That for me is the soul. It's not a division of the one only thing. It's a unique reflection of the one thing in its entirety. The moon also gives you this great gift, and it's necessary to drink moon juice so you forget what you really are. So you can come here and do a Brett or a Nadine or a Winter or an Elizabeth or whatever, right? It may be. And doing that super well, like that was the jam last week. And I don't know if I said that loudly enough, but the sun is still being reflected by all of these moving ones, other moving ones, in its Leo expression. Do you to the fullest. Like that actually is serving spirit. Is self, the individuated self, versus the all, like, is that a polarity? No, but polarity becomes this really interesting word. Even consider that two signs that are opposite one another are actually of the same polarity, depending on how we use that term. Which reminds me to get back to these slides. But I just wanted to speak about the impossibility of this beautiful miracle of the one thing becoming two through its adaptations, through its reflections. All right. So back to the pretty pictures. And let me go back a little bit. So the idea is maybe this circumpunct isn't the circle around a dot from a different perspective. Maybe it's just a line. But maybe a line, if I look at it from its side, is actually a whole circle. And how is this circle of spirit, the absolute unity, animated? So the absolute unity in becoming conscious of itself, simply considering itself, simply looking at itself, creates multiplicity or polarity. One becomes two. Well, could we look at those two circles of the Vesica Piscis on their sides and find this glyph for Gemini? Which these days, we draw as like two pairs, vertical and horizontal. That's a fun thing to consider. It wasn't always that way. Oh, maybe those two lines of the Gemini twins are, if I look from a different perspective, actually 1 and 2. Maybe they're 12. Well, let's explore this great question. Why in the heavens do we have 12 signs? Or maybe why on Earth? That's why. And it's a lot easier to find in the number in time, which is musical harmony, through a study of the harmonic series. And it's not perfect there. And then it is through the sacred astronomy, through number in time and space, because the 12ness there maybe comes from the 12 months in a year. But if you're working with phases, there's actually 12.37 lunations per year. If you're working with moon getting around the earth, getting through our zodiac, there's 13.37 of those sidereal months in a year. Like, it's a tricky space to play. You can, and this is one that just landed for me recently, like if the sun indeed has 15 degrees of beams to the eastern and western side of its zodiac degree, that's 30, right? So it's kind of like the sun is eating 1/12 of the zodiac in any moment's time. It's another one to play with, but it's very clear in number and space, which, is geometry. Let's say sacred geometry, so you don't have flashbacks, right? Of some math class or something. So I love this image of like 12 signs showing the triplicity, showing the, groups of threes that we now call elements, the fire and the air and the water and the earth signs, saying that in the order of density. And we can see here in the seed of life, which is really like how you create the 12-spoked wheel. Okay, you don't do this through creating a perpendicular. And, it's like, let's say it this way, like cutting the quesadilla in half and then halving that into quarters and then halving those into eighths, right? Like, that's actually much more difficult to do with the geometer's tools of compass and rule than creating 12ness, creating the so-called seed of life, which you see here, centered in the, image for yin and yang. And the silver inside, right, the 6-petaled silver flower inside that circle for me is the signs that go down and in, involution, yin, right? So earth, water signs that fall, whereas the air and fire signs rise. So involution, evolution, right? In, out. So you'll see a gold petaled flower of 6 phase to the inner silver petal on the outside, right? So lunar, solar, nocturnal, diurnal, right? Polarity. But I'm also showing here by using what I call the octave circle to create the Enzo, the S curve, to speak about houses, right? Those that are above the ground and below, and also the truth that like it's light outside and the birds start chirping before sun rises. Speaking of, hey, can you can you keep it down out there a little bit? What do you need? Blue jays. And one left a feather for us the other day, and I was like, look, Maya, and then it like had bird poo on it. And I think blue jays are literally crafty enough to do that just to F with me. I prefer to live in that world. Okay, anyway, so this for me, it really opens the gateway of polarity, and it's essential for creating the 12-spoked wheel. Like literally, this is how the zodiac is created, and creation just creates in 12s. So one way that we can look at our 12 are the 2 6s. But first, let's talk about the 6 2s. And I like to call that polarity, right? So Aries and Libra, for example. Put them together, and it spells libraries if they're willing to share an A. And Libra really is. Aries, not so much, right? That doesn't mean Aries is selfish. What books do we find in this library called Libra on one side and Aries on the other? This pole and books of love might go down. Libra is often taught to be the sign of relationship, but really it's only half of the relationship story. And it's not half, it's one side of the relationship story. We need to balance Libra which has a tendency towards otherness with Aries, which reminds us of the importance of selfness, not selfish, selfness. Selfness on one side of the pole, othership on the other side of the pole. Help us walk in the middle way of right relationship, of balanced, harmonic, equal relating. Aries has as much to do with that as Libra does, in my opinion. Do you agree? Do you see what I'm saying there? All right. Winter says there's scrub jays out here. Yeah, scrub jays out my window right now too. Used to be stellar jay for me in Seattle. I don't see them much here, but I see them around other places. Cardinals for pebbles. Melinda reminds us that blue jays and red cardinals make purple martins. I have to meet Martin. All right. So most importantly here, picking up what we're putting down. Gracias. All right, let's move on then. Now, interestingly, the opposition is one of the aspects, the seven rays, that traditionally is associated with Saturn. And you can see this in the Thema Mundi, right? Because Saturn signs are opposite the lights, or Saturn signs are opposite the homes of the sun and the moon. Leo being the sun's place, and Aquarius is opposite. Cancer being the moon's place, and Capricorn is opposite, right? So Saturn opposite the moons, where Jupiter, because Jupiter is associated with Sagittarius, which is trine Leo, and Pisces, which is trine Cancer, is associated with the trine, and Mars, because Aries squares Cancer and Scorpio squares Leo, is associated with a square, and Venus, because Libra sextiles Leo and Taurus sextiles Cancer, is associated with a sextile traditionally. So is Saturn all terrible, sickle toting, right? Like that image that we see there? No. But let's feel into that opposition. Like, consider this question: what is the one thing that Cancer and Capricorn are the two sides of? And I want to ask the community that. Who has a feeling about that? Like, what are Cancer words? What are Capricorn words? Are they opposite? Are Aries and Libra opposite? And geometrically, yes. Like, energetically, are they? What does opposite mean? Like, what is polarity? That's one of the things I want to get after here. So Winter suggests safety would be a word where Cancer and Capricorn are the two sides of. And like safety in our water and our tenderness versus safety in our structure, in our earth and our body, right? Elizabeth, that's a fun one. So oceans and mountains. Yeah, you know, I was writing this thing about the Capricorn Council that formed some years ago. I just found it like in one of my memories in the socials and shared it again. But I did a little research at the time to find actually that the peak of Everest, right, which is not the tallest mountain. Elizabeth, you live on it, right? Mauna Kea, heliacal, like from their foot, you know, down beneath the water to the crown, right, up in the heavens, have more altitude than Mount Everest, for example. But Mount Everest is on Earth the rock that is highest above sea level, yes? Well, that distance between sea level and the top of Everest is also, if you go in the other direction, beneath the ocean surface, where we find the ocean floor, the deepest parts, right, in the trenches. And a cool thing that I found is that Yeti crabs are one of the only life forms that live that far, well, that we know of, that live that far deep beneath the ocean's surface, where we can find the necessities for life because of the fire that's coming out, right? So where the fire and the water play, and there's interesting, poles to play with too. Yeah, there are these Yeti crabs. And of course, the Yetis, like the abominable ones who aren't abominable at all, they're great people. They live up on the peak of Everest. So there you go. Peter, nice to see you here. All right. So, winter kind of goes a little deeper in here: emotional safety and social structure, ancestry and legacy. Cool. Private and public is an interesting image. But there's also something like so similar between, because one can be like the rules of the home and one can be like the rules of the state. All right. Anyway, that's like, it's a really wonderful contemplation. What is the one thing that Taurus and Scorpio are the two sides of? What is the one thing that Scorpio and Taurus are the two sides of? You might actually get different answers if you ask that in retrograde. And with Mercury about to station in Virgo, it's good to ask these questions. Now, I want to show you the very clear truth that if you just flip the Saturn glyph, the cross of matter above the circle of, or the crescent of soul upon itself, you make hearts. Like Saturn's a really beautiful teddy bear kind of character. Let's not think of Saturn only as some like painful force. That'll get you in polarity traps that you might not find your way out of. Don't go only the other way either. You might be practicing like half astrology. All right. So what is the one thing that Gemini and Sagittarius are the two sides of? And that maybe would be most important to our particular investigation right now. What are some answers for that? What is the one thing? What is one word that we could see Gemini and Sagittarius as poles of? Now, just pretend that I asked that question, that I offered that invitation in a grammatically correct way. And then answer it. So, Weird Olive, information. Yes, Sagittarius, so information, I think often we associate with Gemini. Is it with Sagittarius? Knowledge, which I feel like is a word we associate with Sagittarius. Is it with Gemini, right? I feel like maybe even information knowledge would be two sides of a thing. Knowledge, I often also feel I'm kind of Capricornian. Exploratory, right? Gemini is kind of wonder, and it's like, let's look in the books and such. And Sagittarius is the seeker. Wander, how about wonder and wonder, right? I love then that recent, I forgot what it was called, like Fellowship of the Ring thing that happened, which I didn't think was great, but there was a really wonderful song in it, because there's this great line in The Hobbit, right, where it's not all who wander are lost. But there was an update or an expansion in a song in that show. Some of you could say what it is if you want. That was not all who wonder or wander are lost. Like, how beautiful is that? So this one's interesting. Movement, right? People say like Gemini short distance, Sagittarius long. That's kind of just doing a natural zodiac astrological alphabet expression of Gemini equals the third and Sagittarius equals the ninth. Understanding is interesting, but that assumes that Gemini actually understands anything. For some reason, it's the only sign I'll ever poke fun at because I named myself for it. Wait, that's not true. Anyway, which part of that isn't true? For me, truth. With Sagittarius, capital T, truth. And Gemini, the million little T truths. The truth that there are an infinite amount of truths. Like there are times where my partner and I literally believe that opposites are the truth. She has this thing, and I'm like, no, that's just not true at all. This is true. We don't have to both be wrong. In fact, in that moment, we're not. So, that Sagittarius tendency would be like, no, there is one truth, right? There's one way to pray. When we really want to be careful with that, because Sagittarius wants to be the seeker, the journey agent, exploring, right? And in that kind of ninethness, to go travel, see the world, experience different cultures, right? So Peter says movement. Well, this cat moves from Brazil to Italy regularly, right? There's like southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, jungle in the sea, um Peter, I didn't give out your address or anything. Okay, hopefully that's cool. Like as we do wander, as we explore, it's really amazing to find how so many different cultures are trying to get after the same thing. The so-called shadow side of that is believing the truth, and that leads towards fundamentalism. That leads towards, try to tell people who are just purely drinking the Pepsi, and I mean, meaning they're on blue team right now, that it's kind of ridiculous that the Democrats have put forth a presidential nominee who is not, put forth through a democratic process. Right? Like that seems ironic, right? But you can't say that to somebody who's like on that side of the fence. There's no fence. And again, are red and blue two sides of one thing? Right? Interesting question. All right, well, we need to get into this or else we're going to be here forever. But I would suggest that Gemini, Sagittarius are two sides of a thing called truth. Sagittarius, the journey towards, or at least the wish that there is a truth, like a higher truth. And Gemini, the truth that there are many, 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 many truths. So, I'm seeing all these lying people on my TV screen, and I tend towards they know they're lying, but that doesn't have to be true, right? Like the best liars, if there's such a thing, are the ones who lie to themselves so well that they believe their lie is fact. And I'm not calling Gemini a liar. I'm just saying it's really good at it. So like looking at like the Mercury versus Jupiter, it doesn't have to be a versus thing. All right. Just trying to catch up with chat a little bit. And you know what? You are all way too interesting. So let me just push this button and we will see what happens. The Cancer Capricorn with the Capricorn Cancer axis, the Leo Aquarius axis. What is the one thing that Leo and Aquarius are the two sides of? And by the way, don't get lost in the idea that there's only one right answer to that question. What is the one thing that Virgo and Pisces are the two sides of? A way that I love to explore that is that Virgo feels that the sacred is in every tiny cell. And Pisces knows that we are simply a tiny cell of the sacred. Or did I get that backwards? Yes, no. What is the one thing that Aries and Libra are the two sides of? Polarity. Right now, interestingly, both of these two, since we've associated the quadruplicities, the triplicities with elements, like they both belong to elements that go up and out. Aries, fire, Libra, air. So we really need to go to quadruplicity, to a full cross or grand square, to find polarity. In fact, in the way of the seven rays, these are the ancient aspects, which are opposition, two trines, two sextiles, and two squares, why would I say them in that order? Like, that's ridiculous. Opposition, trine, square, sextiles would be a better geometric expression. Well, because the squares have something different than those others, right? I don't like to coin this in feminine and masculine personally. Like, that's how I was taught in my first astrology school, the masculine signs, the feminine signs. That was really challenged for me by clients over time, other people at presentations and stuff, which I really appreciate that. But if you do, then you can look at the sixes and the sexes, right? So there's like air and fire signs are masculine, and earth and water signs are feminine, and there's six of each, right? And then the square would be the only one of the traditional aspects that gender bends, right? Because the opposition, it's going to be like the same polarity, to use that term, right? Like Aries and Libra, they're both of the up and out. They're both of the yang. I prefer to say the diurnal nature. It's trines, Aries and Leo. Right? It's both fire, right? Both yang. Sextiles, Aries and Gemini. Again, fire and air, just like the opposition. Up and out, diurnal, right? But the squares, Aries and Cancer, fire and water, right? And yang and yin, or outer and inner, upward and downward, right? Okay, well, now we're getting to play with lots of polarity statements. So polarity. Which can just get so black and white. Okay, so now we'll enter some of the more polarizing potentials of our journey today. Here I'm looking at the three quadruplicities, the three sets of fours that these days we call modalities, right? And that one's always fun for me because I like to use like red for the fire signs and green for the earth and blue for the water, and by default yellow for the air. Hopefully our air will never be that yellow, for the triplicities, for the elements. And it's like, okay, well, what colors do I have left for the quadruplicities, for the modalities? And it's like black, white, and gray. Let's see, you just get into like tricky territory, even in trying to illustrate these wonderful things, which is, one of the great gifts that I'm consistently asked to unwrap just through wishing to teach these subjects, which I love to do through visuals or, actual experiences. All right. Anyway, the up and the down kind of thing. So I prefer diurnal and nocturnal, right? This comes alive when we do our traditional astrology research. And, day and night, I really are like the essential experienced polarities. So, if we do call the air and fire signs, the Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, diurnal, and the earth and water signs, the, Virgo, Cancer, Taurus, Pisces, Capricorn, Scorpio. Wait, did I say those backwards? If we call them nocturnal, it's important to know that it's not like the diurnal signs can all be above the ground and the nocturnal below the ground at the same time. Still, there is something more solar in the air and fire signs and more lunar in the earth and water signs, according to the tradition. I think most of us feel resonance there. And just because, I'm an astronomer first, that's the polarity nature that I most connect with. As I observe the hexaplicities. Now, I made this word up, right? But really, when we're talking about polarity of signs, whether you like to call them yin and yang, or feminine and masculine, or negative and positive, we're going to go back there because it's maybe the most polarizing. We're not talking about opposite signs. We're talking about neighboring signs. We're talking about signs that are quincunx. We're talking about signs that are square. And we're getting into these two sixes, so the hexaplicities. So the solar six and the lunar six, and it's fun when I put those glyphs there, you can actually see the hexahedrons, the cubes. So the tendency of one up and out and the other down in it. Like now we're kind of speaking in languages that maybe don't offer so much division. I just want to share that there's something so magical about sixness. The radius of a circle that inscribes a regular hexagon is equal to the side length of the hexagon. And let me just say quickly that in the geometry, we find a study of polarity simply through the two tools of the compass and the rule. The compass curves, and you can't measure the length of a curve. You have to use transcendental numbers like pi. So curves are transcendental. And they're just very nature. They're more towards the quality, the immeasurable, where lines are very measurable, right? That's the tool called the rule. Interesting homonym. And so in a sense, like the circle, which some call spirit, or it's an image in the plane of the sphere, which some call the perfect form, the heavenly form, the goddess. Like the closest that the line can do to approach that infinite essence is this regular hexagon. Which it's easy to see the cube therein, right? Now, look, Queen Bee, the queen, she knows all about the power of hexagon. So does Saturn, by the way. This hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn is 3 Earths wide. There's something very inherent to the form of hexagon. Just ask your favorite quartz crystal about this. All right, well, let's get into some of the polarity plays. So we had a reference to the Kybalion before, and I'm going to put that on the screen, although now it's just lost in a jungle of wisdom by those of you who are watching live and participating, and I'm very appreciative of that. I like to, though I haven't, because I don't want to listen to myself speak, but know that I can review these someday and really get to tap into the wisdom of this community. And it's really nice to be able to do that in constellations. By the way, for those of you in constellations, Carolyn Link, the amazing Carolyn Link, cannot host the Friday morning group at 9 a.m. on Friday. So I'll be hosting it. So I hope you can join me there and talk story, share. So Almudena shared this before. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. So opposites are identical in nature. Like hot and cold are actually identical in nature, but different in degree. It's an intriguing thing. So, the Kybalion is like an intriguing thing in and of itself. This text that claims to be ancient, but it seems like it was written in Chicago in the early 1900s, but by wise beings, or one. So it's said to have been written by the 3 initiates, and perhaps those were channeled or whatever. Most people seem to have found a person that penned this text. It's an intriguing one. And it will offer a place for us to get into the principle of polarity in such a way that I can use other words and hopefully have less stones thrown. Not that y'all do that. So there we go. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. What if we were living in accordance with that message now, at this time, where you either believe it was a Luciferian ritual or it was just art with testicles? Or it's the Coke because the Pepsi is, or it's the Pepsi because the Coke is, and let's just, hate our neighbors because of the sign that they put on their lawn, whatever. How about all truths are but half truths? All paradoxes may be reconciled. Doesn't it feel like we're living in paradoxical times? Like, I think that vibe, well, we all know it's heating up, but it doesn't have to burn us. And especially if we also go towards the other side of the pole. Keep it cool, bro. All right. Well, how about this? The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. What do you feel about that? Is that true? This was like a lot easier to talk about 5 years ago, 10. And now it can be really difficult. Yeah. And very divisive. Does anybody know who we're looking at on the screen here? Who is that on the left? Anybody know that hat? Anybody know that staff? Hermes. Yeah, right? Caduceus staff. So we would see winged boots if we had the rest of this tablet. And who's that on the right? I don't know, but she's hanging out with a little winged dude with a lyre. I think that's probably Cupid, and so that's likely his mama. Now, there's a tale about Hermes and Aphrodite, who got to share a special night and produced a child called Hermaphrodite. Now, what's available to us in this myth? Say, Adam Ellenboss gave a really cool talk at UAC in Colorado a few years ago, where he was kind of looking at like the traditional astrology archetype, like those very mercurial beings who are drawn to kind of the information. And I think there's a lot of Saturn there too. Discerning light, like art with testicles. We've done it. Yes. Right here at Storytelling Hour. Anyway, and so he was talking about how, he feels that the traditional astrology inclined is a little more mercurial, or maybe a lot, and that it's more the kind of Venusian that tends to shape those who are on a more of a modern astrology path. And really, of course, we want to do them both, right? And so one way that we can look at Hermes and Aphrodite birthing Hermaphrodite, who's said to be the first hermaphrodite, is like, what is the beautiful child born of the union of mind and heart, right? Of thought and feel. Right, because it used to be a lot easier to speak about really kind of consciously developing your inner sun king and moon queen and bringing them together in the alchemical marriage to birth the divine child. Who is you reborn, right? Like that is the path of reclaiming unity, not by destroying polarity, but through the power of polarity. These days, you might get canceled for saying such a terrible thing as the masculine. Yes? I mean, and that's like, from my experience, like calming down. I don't know. It might be because I've said those things enough to clear out my crowd. But it's also because I really I feel, at least accepted the challenge. That's not the right terminology at all. But I really appreciate the opportunity for us to explore polarity in new ways. And there's a really interesting question about what is this great change that like culture, at least the culture to which I was born, seems to be being initiated through. And is it, something that's in the stars? Is it about this time on Earth? Or is it something in the laundry detergent? you know? I mean, you can see that I'm being very careful with my speech. But I ask you to explore. I realized the other day that that as I'm kind of falling prey at times to the polarity program, or let's say even more like division directive of the news. Well, if I can release that idea that astrology is a little column in the newspaper and remember that the news is just a tiny little column of astrology, it gets a lot easier because I can attempt to explore this through the principles of the planets and the signs and the, aspects, etc. Though, of course, it gets very difficult. It's impossible to do that in an unbiased way, right? It's one of the reasons why I suggest learning many paradigms of astrology. All right, well, let's continue on here. So Venus and Mars. So where I first studied, which was at then the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, now the Shamanic Astrology paradigm being taught by the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, it really was that Venus is the image of your divine feminine, and Mars is the image of your sacred masculine, and that there's a process of the hero's gymos or sacred marriage that you can do by getting to know these two sides of you, and that women will tend to know their Venus and project their Mars and the opposite for men. And that just gets really tricky in modern times. And so that was one of the things that actually kind of stimulated my need to go study other paradigms as well. Alice O'Howell. Hopefully you've read this book. It's a great book. I really recommend you get the Shamanic Astrology Handbook, by the way, while you can, if you don't have it already. The Jungian Symbolism in Astrology by Alice O'Howell, and then her follow-up text, which was The Heavens Declare. I would say they're kind of essential books for the modern astrology student. Anyway, she speaks about how Venus and Mars work differently depending on which side of the pole you're coming from. It's an interesting thing. It's interesting to see what the Moon Queen is pointing to down there in this ancient alchemical woodcut. I needed to turn the moon there, by the way, because the smile of the moon or the bow of the moon will always be shooting arrows at the sun. Yeah, but what is it in bringing the sun and the moon together, right? Like, I very much personally appreciate the kind of alchemical invitation to get to know these two sides of self, whatever we want to name them, to birth the child. And this is the one and the two becoming the three. So in geometry, as I've been saying, like if just looking at the compass and the rule, right? And this will offer plenty of polarity, showing symbols like that. But they really help us explore polarity as well, and the immeasurable curve, the measurable line. Like they're very important. Always a way I love to teach this is I used to drive a lot from Seattle to the Bay. And the line's way is I-5. It's like the shortest distance between 2 points is the line, and that's the closest you can get. But the curve says, travel the coast. Who knows who you'll meet along the way? Pack a bag, And I think it's really important for us to explore curves and circles, curves and lines. So like lines in astrology, for example, right? Know your rules, like know the approach, know a paradigm, for example. Somebody asks you about divorce, where do you start in their chart? I mean, depends upon which astrology you ask, but it's good to know. But somebody's asking you about an investment, where do you start? Well, I like to say the art of the chart starts in the heart. So for me, like I want to learn the rules of astrology that's very line, but I also want to be a curvy being. I want to like be there with people in their times of sharing pleasures and pains. I want to be curvy and liney in everything that I do. And I think it's an important reminder to balance the light of the sun, the reflections of the moon. I love that we see in this image for the heart chakra, the 12 petals emerging out of the 6. Friends, this is the zodiac, which really is the heart of an incarnated experience. Ups and downs and yins and yangs and ins and outs and all the things, and maybe just like allowing these to be interwoven. So here's an interesting thing to put on the screen at this time of division and polarity, isn't it? I'm purposefully moving quickly because I want to get to what I feel was the most important update in this presentation that I actually shared twice. Let me actually stop this and find out where I am. Okay. We're going to have to skip a Pink Floyd song. All right, so we can start here. Re-enter in this space. Oh, no, we can't. Buttons. Wrong button. Buttons. And here we go. Okay, so the up and the out and the down and the in. And really, we can kind of study these 6s, these hexagons, through this polarity of, I wouldn't say above and below, especially since those terms carry such like connotations of better than and worse than, right? So this is going to be the place where we really enter the polarizing potential of this presentation, okay? But I like to see this as like inner and outer, down and in, up and out. And it's kind of interesting to look at this sine wave, right? So as I look like here, right? And I had to skip a bit before when I shared particle versus wave and on we go. So this image might not completely convey, but just know that yellow circle as like the ecliptic, right? The sun's path, which is created by Earth's orbit of the sun. And what I'm showing here is kind of this idea of the signs weaving in and out. So Aries, outer, Taurus, inner, Gemini, outer, Cancer, inner, Leo, outer, Virgo, inner, right? So the nocturnal down and in, the diurnal up and out. And then showing those on like just stretching that circle into a line, cutting it, right? Stretching it out so we can measure it. And now we see the inner and the outer as this like wave. And I like to put the diurnal down because they help us ground, which we're going to explore in different ways now, right? But be careful, because if we call like the diurnal signs above and the nocturnal signs below, are we saying that the diurnal signs are better than, greater than, Right. Well, then what if we say that the diurnal signs are masculine signs? Are they better than the feminine sign? You better be careful, dude. Right. Fortunately, I'm just presenting this through Zoom and nobody's here to smack me. So diurnal, nocturnal, they're just like easier for me. And they're actually just so felt and experienced. About above and below. How do you feel about that word below? Right. How about these words? Because like the astronomers will talk about like above and below as superior and inferior. And that just sounds better than and lesser than, right? So we're going to take this and get into even more trouble, right? Like when I turn these white and black, it's just now an opportunity for racism or sexism, right? Be careful. And so it's really difficult to explore polarity without getting into polarizing spaces. And when you do this, like in your own inner adventure, right, which doesn't not have critic, right? It's, I don't know, safer is not the right word, but a little bit deeper because you'll have less hesitation. When you can find community to go to these spaces and these difficult places together, especially when you can find community when you have folks who appear to be on opposite sides of a pole, right? Then you really have the energy to go a little deeper. And that's the power of polarity. All right, we got to talk about the Holy Ghost. But let me just take this a little bit further. So, yeah, I wanted to show this like masculine is positive and feminine is negative. Like, no, be careful, right? But I think very importantly, let me put this question answer up by Peter, which I really love, right? Do polarities offer a view of the infinite? Yes. So, people like the most common way to describe these two sets of six signs for a long time in astrology was the positive signs and the negative signs. Now, how does that make you feel? Like but I think it's actually a really cool teaching. I just like to turn them like red and black because if you've ever wired a lamp or something that has more current running through it, more voltage, then you will know that it's like the negative cord that's your friend, right? Like the positive will shock your ass, and that's very diurnal. It's full of fire, electricity, right? Why is the black cord your friend, the negative pole? Because it's grounded. Like literally, that circuit, that side of the circuit, like in your home, if things are done right, is running to a stake, a metal stake that's deep in the ground. Why? Because it's grounded then electrically in the water currents of Mother Earth. So is negative bad? No, positive will shock your ass. And good and bad are like probably the worst words for potential polar play. How about benefic and malefic, So you can take your own adventure there. This is me just encouraging you to and suggesting that in the times in which we are currently participating with, there's going to be more polarity on the screens, maybe than ever before. So importantly, if we're wise, and I've already failed the rice since telling myself, remember this, before you respond, take a breath or three. I've already like picked fights, and that whole scene I was looking at that kind of stimulated this topic for storytelling hours today. It's like all up in my first house, so it's like right up my ascendant and my moon. And so I can understand why I'm like personally flailing. But I can also understand, why this is going to be very personal for me. So one thing I would encourage you just at this time is to look at where the mutable signs land in your own nativity. And by the way, my job is reading charts. And if you want to support the work and you're interested in kind of sharing a little bit about what's alive for you right now or in a couple months, please come over to GeminiBrett.com and book a session. GeminiBrett.com sessions will get you right there. If you want to just buy a cup of tea, GeminiBrett.com/donate. And GeminiBrett.com/constellations, right? You can support the work by offering $16 a month, and you'll get not only these storytelling things, which are free for the community and a community participation, but you'll come into constellations where we offer a different class every week and organize, well, scheduled community discussions where we can really explore these things together. All right. So, my favorite thing about presenting this topic last year was a question that came in at the end, which asked, like, wait a second, if we look at this as positive and negative, then why are the opposites on the same pole? And I really appreciate that question. See, I have been until that point, I wouldn't even allow myself to consider the set called Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius as positive and the others as negative. Like, I just felt like this one is good and this one is bad because positive means good and negative means bad. No, they don't. Not in like electric circuits. And again, like, the negative side is your friend because the positive side will shock your ass, right? Like, and so it's the kind of was helpful to have that question asked. Like, I had only because I had been taught this idea of like masculine and feminine as the framework for these two polarities to ask this question of like, well, why are the relationship axis, right? That's the opposites, right? First and seventh house. So you always have opposite signs, the ascendant and the descendant. Like, why are they always of the same gender? What does that say about the relationship design in Zodiac consciousness? But I love that one of the students in the golden year, kind of asked this beautifully challenging question of, hey, wait, why are opposites of the same charge? Shouldn't they be opposites? Shouldn't Aries and Libra, like, shouldn't one be positive and the other one be negative so that they will attract? Shouldn't Taurus and Scorpio, Gemini and Sag, right? And they're not. And so I had to go back in and do this, which was really helpful. And then especially this, like, if the opposites, because they really are the opposite side of the earth, if they were of opposite charge, so see, they're just not opposites. If they were, then everything would just collapse on us instantaneously. Or the Aries Libra, the Cancer Capricorn, whatever, it was all just collapse in. Like, it would never even allow for, not only wouldn't allow for expansion, wouldn't even allow for an experience in space. Just crumple. Here we do have expansion, and look, neighboring signs are always, of course, of the opposite polarity. And so all you have to do is give this thing a little push, and it's going to be like a perpetual energy device. So I'm so glad I remembered about these slides this morning, because it helped me share some things in images that I meant to get into together. You may have recognized, if you've been here since the beginning, these words that I sang at the top. Strangers passing in the street, by chance two separate glances meet, and I am you, and what I see is me. I love that so much. It's from Echoes by Pink Floyd. Watch Pink Floyd live in Pompeii. Do it. It's good for you. Listen to Us and Them by Pink Floyd. It's a really wonderful opportunity to explore polarity and the division bell that's going to ring louder and louder if we're not conscious. And, conscious isn't always enough. Conscious, careful, and most importantly, considerate, which means, of course, with the stars. Okay, what were you going to remind me about? What was that? Oh, right. Thanks. The Holy Ghost. Yes. So let's talk about 1, 2, and 3. But let's start by talking about 4. And the way that I love to share these things: Sun, Moon, Earth. Earth, 4. You can see it in the 6, right? The 2 that I love to invoke, John Anthony West, in that text I was describing before, we heard a little bit from it. And by the way, in the golden year of classes that are still available at geminibrett.com/courses, I also go through sacred number and sacred geometry. I was going to go to 12, but I went to 7, where things get really confusing. And Serpent in the Sky by John Anthony West was one of the texts that help fuel that journey. Drawing geometries has been, I think, my most important astrology teacher energetically. And so Jonathan Anthony West talks in that text about mother, father, child as a 1, 2, 4. Like sculptor and like the block of stone, and the sculpture as a 1, 2, 4. Wait, where's the 3? I like to speak about the saxophonist and the saxophone. You know what? A cool thing, like, well, if you think about the sculptor, like the block will make your arm sore. In the saxophone, or like, a wind instrument, a really cool thing is like the back pressure of the air. And that actually, like, as much as I'm changing like the length of the saxophone by opening and closing the tone holes, the only way those tones are actually coming out is by me, and it's pretty subconscious until it's not, changing the shape of my airstream inside me. And so the saxophone is playing me as much as I'm playing it. I remember at one point when I realized that my saxophone, like the principal saxophone that I play, is older than me, and that we should respect my elders. I was like, yo, what do you want to play? That was a really helpful way to start creating a relationship between my instrument and myself that I didn't when I was just using it as a tool for my own creative, needs. Yeah. Anyway, I like to say that the saxotone is the 4, and that's noise, and that can't happen without a saxophone and a saxophonist. Right? By the way, the 5, which I call sound, is your experience of that noise. So if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? No, it makes a noise. It vibrates the medium. As soon as someone's there to hear it, to experience it, now it's a sound. Okay, the astronomy, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the coming Mars-Jupiter conjunction, noise. As you experience it in your own unique way. And your chart will give you clues as how to bring your own consciousness and energy and intentions to that opportunity, right? Sound. Noise, measurable. Sound, immeasurable. Noise, quantity. Sound, quality. For me, that's the 4 and the 5. Okay. So saxotone, noise, 4. Like I can break out my horn and play, and you might be pulled in, or you might run away because you are you, right? And that's going to be unique for you. Like going and sharing a concert with somebody is so amazing. But even if we both love it, it's also kind of separating because we both have different experiences of it. 5, right? So sound is very unique. It's as unique as you are. And you are entirely unique. You're a magical moment experienced in a particular space. So saxotone is the noise. How do you experience it? Sound. 5. Saxotone. 4. Saxophone and saxophonist, the two who are actually not two, are necessary to create the noise, the saxotone, the 4, so you can hear and turn that noise into sound, which, by the way, is not only your right as a human being, it's your responsibility. And hopefully you can feel that I'm not simply talking about saxotone when I express that. What am I talking about? And you might wonder, well, dude, you keep saying 1, 2, 4. What do you have against 3? And by the way, it's in the same design of why I like to share that the trine is like the least understood thing in astrology. And that 3-ness is close to 1-ness. Because the 3-ness, and Winter said this before, it's the relationship. Right? Like, I don't want to. We were looking at the queen bee before, and I don't want to like get all birds and bees and shock any of you, but Scorpion and I had to do some stuff together to make a baby. It was awesome. There's this need for a mother and a father to get pulled together for a child to be born, right? And so again, it's a little bit easier to go into saxophone and saxophonist and saxotone, right? Like a saxophone cannot make saxotone without a saxophonist. A saxophonist cannot make saxotone without a saxophone, right? These are the not two. And again, like, and I really encourage you to play some saxophone if you haven't. Like, you get to experience how like the instrument plays you. And literally, like the air column that's on the outside of you is mapped, at least in volume, by the air column inside of you when the tone is good. Like that's a really cool journey into the power of relating and relationship. But relationship is this third thing. And it's not right. Winter, I'm interested in why the capital REL when you wrote that relationship. Teach me, sister, what is going on here. I hope y'all have been enjoying our polarity party. I just want to say this. Why do I call the third thing the Holy Ghost? It's just a kind of fun term, but it is a very mystical and beautiful thing. There is this need to create. And that need, it's also born of the two things. So much of this has to do with not only what we like choose to engage with, but how we engage with it. Astrology is not a little column in the newspaper. The news is a tiny little column in astrology. And I hope that will remind us all that if we can try to get out of the tidal waves of the emotional pushes and pulls in this polarity program of duality division and just kind of take a look from above, then we can come back in. Because friends, astrology is not a way out, it is a way in. But if we can go out there and try to take like a more centered glance and then come in and to experience it, hopefully with some more perspective, that we won't get pulled apart, but rather put together. what is the third thing that brings us to the instrument that helps us create beautiful noise? Well, it's only beautiful if you believe it to be. So anyway, I hope you've really enjoyed your time together with me here. I'm so appreciative of your wisdom, that which you share, how you participate. This whole thing gets a lot more interesting if I'm not the only one on the mic. All right, hence constellations. So please consider joining me in the School of Astrology's membership world, constellations. It's kind of just getting off the ground. So GeminiBrett.com/constellations to go there. $16 a month or $160 for the year. You can leave at any time and sign up before Saturday, and you can join me live for a class on better ways to play with Mercury retrograde that will be presented at 9 a.m. this Saturday, August 3rd, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip. As always, in constellations, that won't be done just by me presenting stuff. We'll do that through chart examples. And I think we'll start with some community discussion chart example and then go into lecture space and then come back as the circle on the other side of all that. So come play with me. Better ways to play with Mercury retrograde. I hope to see you there this Saturday. 1 week from today on miércoles, on Wednesday, storytelling hour at 11:11, we're going to talk about 8-8. And maybe I'll even play with the weirdness of the 8 and the 11 in different tarot systems over time. And balance and strength and the like, and lust. Anyway, 8-8 Lion's Gate. Is it the most magical portal of the new age, or is it the new cage? And at least from what I can offer, is there actual astronomical foundation beneath this 8-8 Lionsgate phenomena? Or is it just, number play for those of you who are on that whole Gregorian trip, man? Time will tell. I look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Thanks again for honoring me with the present of your presence. Thank you for supporting the work. And I will see you in space. Last thing, when I hear myself say this, please remind me, take 3 breaths and then respond. Or maybe through the breathing, you'll have realized that that thing you were going to say might be better left unsaid. Importantly, we must know what to say. We must know what not to say. We must know what not to say. Some things must be said, but a few breaths will help us remember who we are sharing them with. I'm so happy to share with amazing beings like you. Thanks for playing. See ya.